Good evening. Thank you all for tuning in to Frontline Access with Maccabi Canada. Before we begin, thank you once again to the virtual JCC and our producers, Jared and Yuri, for all the work behind the scenes. I'm your host, Daniel Smadjewicz, and it's my honor to welcome tonight Glen Grunwald and Rowan Barrett from Basketball Canada. If you're not familiar with these two gentlemen, Glen currently serves as the president and CEO of Canada Basketball, playing a critical role in the expansion of the game across our country. Prior to joining Canada Basketball, Glen served as the GM of the Raptors and the Knicks. Under Glen, the Raptors qualified for the playoffs 3 times and advanced to the conference semifinals once. However, he was most important for orchestrating the trade of Vince Carter to the Raptors in the 1998 draft. Rowan currently serves as the executive vice president and general manager of Canada Basketball. Undrafted into the NBA, Barrett was a member of both the Raptors and 76ers organizations before taking his career literally around the world, playing in Spain, Argentina, Venezuela, Cyprus, Greece, France, Italy, and in Israel. While in Israel, Barrett played for Maccabi Rishon LeZion, Hapoel Haifa, and Ramat HaSharon. A proud Canadian, Barrett also played on Team Canada at multiple World Championships, Pan American Games, and the 2000 Summer Olympic team. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
First off, your CVs are too long, both of you.
Well, I'm too old and I can't keep a job. That's my problem. So, I don't know.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
So how are you guys doing during this pandemic, and how are your families?
You know, I think it's been obviously a difficult time in some regards for most people. And I think in other regards, it's been a tremendous time. Just a lot of time with family, really it's been a long time since I've had both my boys at the dinner table each night. And, so that's been a really, really good thing. And, being able to speak into your children, especially at these ages, I think is something we all cherish that do have children. So it's been great from that aspect. It's also been challenging, working with the athletes and seeing the challenges they're going through, kind of wanting to play and doing that, and just trying to keep their juices flowing a little bit, trying to encourage them. But they've been good and bad, I would say.
Yeah, I would say the same. It's been a lot busier than I first anticipated. I thought for a while there we're just gonna, be able to learn a second language and do all this other stuff. But everything's changed, so everything's got to be replanned and discussed, and presents new challenges, and so it's been a busy time for folks at Canada Basketball, and I think like a lot of other businesses that are trying to keep going and keep things relevant and moving things forward. So yeah, it's been a tough time in a lot of ways, but hopefully we're being productive and making the most of what we have.
So Glenn, did you download Duolingo and choose a language, or was just a passing thought?
I have Duolingo already, so yeah. Spanish would be a great language to learn in this role that I have right now, because we play so many countries in the America zone, the FIBA, that speak Spanish. But I have a ways to go before I'm anywhere close to carrying on a conversation.
So obviously the biggest news for Canada Basketball was the postponement of the Summer Olympics. How did that affect you, and how does it affect your preparation moving forward?
I think it's really simple in that you kind of just have to move everything a year back. Challenging in the one sense that, we felt like we had some momentum. We had the players all signing on, wanting to play, ready to go. And then obviously this happens. And so now we're still waiting, obviously, for the NBA to determine exactly when their season is going to begin and end next year. I'm not sure that that's fully been defined yet. Obviously we have the qualifying tournament to get there. And so, obviously some of the players, you're going a year later in your contract. So, who's now under contract, who's not, right? There's some of those kinds of things that we have to weigh. But again, like with everything, there's always, positive, within the storm that you can find. And for us, I think a year more of experience for some of our players playing in the NBA and now hopefully playing within the playoffs, I think is going to be good for their development, as we do have a very young team. So definitely for us, I think more good than bad, and we're rebounding, and we'll be ready to go when the ball goes up.
Yeah, I second that. Rowan's done a great job getting the team ready to go for the Olympics, and we'll have to see how it all plays out next summer. But on the other hand, too, our women have qualified for the Olympics, and they're still eligible to play in the Olympics. So let's fingers crossed that the Olympics actually happen. And then there's a new sport in the Olympics this year, 3-on-3 basketball. So we'll have the ability for a team to try and qualify for that. So, really exciting times to be involved in basketball. Things are going well, but also the sport's growing so fast, and it's fun to be a part of it.
So we'll touch on the growth of the sport in a minute, but you mentioned 3-on-3 basketball. How is that team structure going to work? Can you take from your men's team, or are they different competitors?
No, FIBA's got sort of a strange system that's going to be revised for the next Olympics, I'm sure, but it requires players to accumulate points by winning games in official FIBA tournaments and playing in FIBA tournaments. So it limits the ability to have pro players that play either in Europe or the NBA, because they're busy playing for their pro teams when they should be accumulating points for 3-on-3. So it was designed by FIBA to expand basketball across the world to countries that haven't had success in 5-on-5 basketball because they're so small or whatever it might be. So if you really focus your efforts and get your best players playing 3-on-3, you can qualify for the Olympics. And witnesses that Mongolia is a top 2 team in 3-on-3 basketball now. So anyways, it is what it is, but we do have an opportunity to qualify. Unfortunately, our women's 3-on-3 team was really good. Really, I think qualitatively was the second best in the world, maybe the first, but didn't have enough points to qualify, and that was a real shame. So again, we're trying to get that straightened out, but it's a new sport too, and it's growing and developing.
So let's bring it to a grassroots level. You mentioned the success of Team Canada, men's and women's. 1 year and 3 days ago, the Raptors won the NBA championship. Coast to coast, even here in Montreal, it was the headline. Everyone was talking about it. What is the outlook for Team Canada based upon, the momentum from the Raptors, from our youngest kids to our senior men's team? How is that affecting things?
I would say that, one of the things that we saw, for example, when we won the World Championship back in 2017, which was, Canada Basketball's first ever World Championship win. We just saw the kids coming out in droves to the gyms, right? The numbers just escalate immediately when you see success. And so I think, obviously, when you're looking at the Toronto Raptors, you're going to see it, hopefully exponentially grow. And so we're seeing the largest numbers that we've ever seen in our youth ages in the junior academy, which is at 7th, 8th grade, 12, 13 years old. It's the largest numbers that we're seeing. We've gone from having, maybe the top 40 kids, for example, in a province like Ontario, now to having to have 60 kids because we can't tell the difference between, the first and the last. It's just, it's growing. It's amazing. And definitely we're the beneficiaries of that. And I believe that once the base grows, obviously, as you continue to compete, the ones that get to the top are going to be obviously, even that much better. And so, I think that we've led the world in the past 10 years putting players into the NBA. And, with this continued growth, with more athletes on the floor playing and getting good coaching, you'd hope to expect to see that continue in the next decade.
Yeah, I'll second that. Rowan's done a great job in terms of developing some grassroots programming, doing some identification camps to target the best athletes, and it's shown in terms of our participation at the NCAA and NBA and pro sports levels. So what we've seen now is Canada really has become a basketball nation. It was witnessed last year by the Raptors fans following, over almost 60% of the people in Canada watched the Raptors on TV at some point during the playoffs. And we've seen the growth in basketball at the grassroots level too. Almost 1.3 million kids play basketball in Canada and organized basketball, which is unbelievable. And we just completed our strategic plan, which is we've called Unifying Basketball Nation, because we have so many great people working in basketball. We want to bring them all together to work together strategically, making sure that the players have the best experience possible. Our coaches are trained as well as possible. We had 2 major feedbacks from our interviews across the nation. The 2 things that we needed. One was more and better referees, of course. but we have so many games, we're running short of referees, and guys are refereeing 6 or 7 games a day. So we have to really recruit and retain referees. And the second thing is more facilities for basketball. Because, again, more kids are playing, and there's just the gyms are not as available. So we're really trying to work with our communities and work with the government because, there's it seems to me as a basketball guy, there's a hockey arena in every corner in every town, but there is no basketball-only facilities in this country. And Rowan and I were just in Australia with the men's team on an exhibition tour. Every city in Australia had a fabulous basketball facility with 7 or 8 10 practice courts and then a mini arena to play games. That's what we need to do in Canada. We need to get that going here. Canada's ranked higher than us. They're a smaller country than us. They have a fewer population, but because they have that infrastructure, they've been able to really grow the sport, and we're right there. And I think we can continue to grow the sport by getting those facilities, getting those referees, improve our coaching. And like I said, Rowan's done a great job in terms of the grassroots, and we just need to keep it going.
So this is more of a loaded question, but basketball had an auspicious start in Canada because we had a team in Vancouver and Toronto, and Vancouver did not work out, as we all know. Why do you think the Grizzlies did not stay in Vancouver? Did the community not accept them? Was it a financial issue? Was it just a NBA at work?
I have my opinion, but local ownership is key. They sold the team to a non-Canadian, non-Vancouverite, and they didn't have the same ties to the city. Vancouver is a fabulous market for basketball, and they should have a team. So that's the nature of it. Vancouver has a few other issues, disadvantages compared to Toronto, because Toronto is corporate Canada's headquarters. So we have all those businesses buying season tickets, buying boxes, sponsorships, and that nature. But certainly Vancouver, just like Seattle, could support a team, but it's very competitive, and there's a lot of people that want to buy NBA teams, a lot of cities that want to host them. It's going to be tough.
Not much to add to that. I mean, you just hope that with the game and the way that it's grown, there's much more fans now in this country as well, and so you'd hope to see more and more interest in Vancouver, but not much to add to what Glenn said.
Yeah, it makes sense that, especially with the growth of the Raptors, that more Canadian cities could house a professional team.
It would be great to have a team in Montreal, by the way, because I've been to some exhibition games there. They really packed that Molson joint. I tell you what, they've got great fans. So, I don't know who's better for the next franchise in Canada, Montreal or Vancouver. I'll let others argue over that, but I'd take either.
Well, we'd love to have a second professional sports team in this city, whether it be basketball or baseball, but conversation for another stream.
All right.
Glenn, I'll ask you about the origins of the Raptors. You were there from day one, and you were also instrumental in bringing Vinsanity to Toronto. So first off, talk to us about how a team comes together and how you built an expansion team.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, I didn't build it. So I was one of the first employees, though, and it was really an exciting time to sort of build from scratch. Coming to a new city, a new country I was living in Denver at the time, and just seeing how it all came together and all the challenges we had to overcome to build a new arena without the cooperation of the Maple Leafs. There was some real sort of negativity in some of the media about, basketball's not going to work here. And, some of the old guard maybe. So, but it was great to see the reception to the sport and to work with a lot of wonderful people like Isaiah Thomas and John Bitove and then, Larry Tannenbaum. We had just some tremendous people to work with, and just exciting to really see something, start from scratch in a way, and then see it grow into, world champions. So it's very exciting.
I think it's amazing on the athlete side, what the impact of that had, right? When you see all of our players now slowly, one by one, going into the NBA, growing up watching the game in their own country, right? And for once, looking at athletes on TV in Canada and saying, wow, that's where I belong. That's me. I'll be that person, And, numerous of our players are on record speaking to how that impacted them to be able to go down to the arena, to be able to see a Vince Carter or a Tracy McGrady or whatever it was. And those types of experiences, being able to see it, make you believe that you can achieve it. And you just started to see one by one all these players. It's going to be very interesting to see, to your earlier question, what the impact of the Raptors' success this past year is going to have on our country from a basketball perspective 20 years from now.
Yeah, and to watch that Carter Effect, that documentary about Vince Carter, I don't know if everyone saw it. To realize all the other stuff that's going on culturally, which is really enlightening, I think, to see that in terms of how the NBA brought, just a whole almost new culture, and how Drake became part of that. And it was really interesting for me to see, which I, didn't really realize at the time.
So as basketball guys, you brought up Drake. He was a question for later on. What do you think about his involvement, his ambassadorial role with the team, and the famous tap last season during the game? What do you think about his involvement? And is positive, negative, somewhere in between?
I think it's phenomenal. Here's somebody that's coming in. He's a musician. I mean, he has a whole other group of fans, that he's bringing into the NBA and bringing to Toronto, really, and helping Toronto, on the map. When Drake is sitting at a game, right, like it's going to be shown in France, it's going to be shown in all the different countries of the world, right, where sometimes it might not be. And so, I just think that to the level that he can drive it, all the histrionics on the sideline, I think all those things are good for the game, actually. I think it brings some fans, much like a Dennis Rodman type, way back in the day, if you can imagine. It wasn't so much about how great a player he was. It was that he brought something different. He brought something different to the game that people like to see. And not that Drake is Rodman, but I definitely think he brings a different dynamic that fans love to see. And I think it's been great. I think it's been great for our game.
Now I just want to jump back to, because Glenn, you mentioned Vince Carter, touch on Vinsanity and take us back to draft day in '98 and his career in Toronto and the impact that he left on the city. You touched on the impact a little bit, but to bring us back to that draft day and orchestrating that trade.
Oh well, it was the typical draft day where you're in the draft room figuring out what everyone else is trying to do. We had Vince come to visit us. He was sort of a late entry into the draft. He was an early entry, but he put his name in at the last minute, and he had a non-traditional agent working with him, a football agent named Tank Black. So he probably didn't get as much exposure to all the other teams, but we had scouted him all throughout the year and really liked him. And North Carolina probably didn't want him to leave, so they were not encouraging him to come out too. So he kind of, in a way, snuck through the draft process, but we always liked him. He was, came in for his workout. At the time, we had some concerns about people wanting to play in Toronto and Canada, but Vince came in. He was excited about coming to Toronto, liked the idea of playing in Canada, and then he had a phenomenal workout. He's a phenomenal athlete, and one of the comparisons to him was Harold Miner, which is another very athletic player, but didn't quite work out in the NBA. But I thought Vince's skill level and IQ was such that he would be able to really, maximize his athletic gifts, and he certainly did that. So it worked out. Interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
It was very interesting watching him. Like in his first year, I was in the training camp there when he came in, and very interesting because as pros, we didn't know a whole lot about Vince Carter, right? I was overseas. I mean, sometimes you're playing in the pros, you're not really paying as much attention to the college guys. And, it wasn't that he was a great college player. I mean, he was a solid player. And I just remember the practices, Charles Oakley, as we see him there on screen. I mean, he was just grounding everyone, right? Like you weren't dunking anything around the rim with him there, right? He's putting the wood on you, hitting you hard. And so I really didn't see or understand, Vince Carter's level of athleticism. And maybe a week in, we're standing under the rim, 3 or 4 of us, flat-footed, and Vince jumps up for the rebound, and he grabs it with his left hand and throws it through the basket without touching the rim. And it's like one of these moments where everybody in the gym stopped and said, what the hell just happened? Like this was otherworldly kind of what happened. And to watch him come in there, learn how to work, learn how and grow, and eventually, take on the franchise was really amazing to see, especially with Tracy McGrady there. at the same time. So, Glenn, you guys were doing great work, at that time, and very, very, very talented, and obviously left his imprint, here on the city.
So we obviously know Vince from the highlight reels. What type of guy was he on the court and off the court?
Very humble. He was very humble. Self-effacing at times. Wanted to be around the group. Just wanted to be one of the guys. Wasn't a prima donna. Wasn't looking for all the attention, and all that. I do think really played to win the games. Especially when you're really young. Sometimes the guys want to go for the highlights. They don't really understand the greater context. But I think as much as he could have at that young age, I think he really did try to play to win. Generally was liked by his teammates from what I can remember. Just a really solid, good kid.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Really a nice guy. Very happy for he had such a good career. I was a little worried for a while that he had all those injuries and was going to shorten his career, but I think he figured out how to take care of his body, and I think he showed that his skill level and his IQ managed to keep him in the league for a long time, even though he maybe wasn't the same athlete. So happy for him. And he's, he really is a good person, and you like to see good things happen to good people.
So I'll bring in a question from the website for both of you guys. What is your favorite part about being involved with Canada basketball?
Rowan's been involved. By the way, Rowan has played more games for Canada than any other player in the world in the history of Canada basketball. Is that in fact true, Rowan?
I think that Eli Pasquale might have me by 1 or 2 games.
Really? Well, we'll suit you up this summer then. We got a big record. Come on, you still look like you can play a little bit.
Hey, I can knock it down in the corner. That's about it. I can knock it down in the corner. No, you know what? For me, it's been kind of a lifelong thing. It feels like, right? I started playing with the national team when around 18 years old or so, and played as many years as I could possibly play. Playing, I started in '91, and I finished in 2008. Playing for Canada, and then to be able to, when I saw what was starting to happen with the growth of the game, and I saw all of these athletes, I thought, wow. We have a moment. We have a moment here. If we can capture this moment and pull the Andrew Wigginses in and the Jamal Murrays and all these athletes.
The RJ Barretts.
Eventually the RJ Barretts. Who could we be? What could we be? And so, I spoke to Steve Nash, at the time. And, we took a look at the players. We took a look at what was going on. I said, Steve, this is the time. This is the time. Him and I had a promise that we made to each other when we were playing back in maybe 2003, that, when we were finished playing, that we would do whatever we could to help our country. And when I saw what was happening with these players and Steve was still playing, I said, Steve, I don't think we can wait. The players, they're not going to wait. They're coming. And then he said, look, I'm willing to get involved. And then we both said, hey, let's get involved and do whatever we can, really to help it. And it's been great. It doesn't feel like work, right? When you're doing the thing you love, to do, you really don't feel like you're working. And that's kind of been my experience. And, I don't have to raise all the money that Glenn does. So maybe that's why some of my gray hairs haven't come in yet. But it's been a great experience for me.
Yeah, same here. It's just, to come here in 1994, everyone said, well, now basketball's in Canada. Well, really what happened was basketball has been in Canada for a long, long time, right? We won the silver medal in the first 1936 Olympics, I think it was. And we've played basketball in the schools throughout the time. So when I came here with the Raptors, basketball was well established. They were producing players like Rowan Barrett, who was a whole heck of a player. But what's happened is it's really taken off, and the growth of the game has been so exciting, and to try and shape that growth so that we can reach our potential as a nation, not only in terms of winning medals on the international podium, but making sure that kids have great experiences when they play basketball, and that they understand that there's a opportunity for them to continue in the sport as a lifelong, whether it's a coach or a manager or administrator or a fan, to really appreciate this beautiful game that we have, and to make sure that, like I said, Canada really achieves its potential. And Rowan was there when we won our first gold medal in Egypt with the under-19 team. And I think we've got the opportunity with our men's senior team if it all comes together. But we are working really hard to do that. And as Rowan mentioned, finances are always an issue, but we're making some progress on that front. But we have a ways to go too. So exciting times to be involved in basketball in Canada.
So a lot about the basketball development, it happens at the college level. Can you compare and contrast the CIS game or the youth sports to what we see in the NCAA? Because everyone always talks about March Madness, but there's few people are talking about what's happening in Canadian colleges.
Well, I think one great thing that's happened is that we're seeing more and more professional athletes coming out of youth sport, right? I mean, and I think that speaks to the level of coaching that's grown in the game, especially over the last decade or so. And, now athletes are having that opportunity to stay home, play home, get the minutes on the floor, become a part of those communities, and then eventually, go ahead and find themselves professional careers. And again, when you have better players, at the top, eventually you're seeing more and more and more teams, with athletes staying home and playing. So I think that's been great for our game. I think obviously the big discrepancy is going to be on the financial side, right? There's just so much more money, in the NCAA game. The recruiting budgets are insane what they're able to do. They're able to go anywhere they want in the world to go get players. And so, I think that's one thing. Obviously scholarships, that as well is something that affects, the game here in comparison to what you would see, in the NCAA. Obviously, there are some families that, are going to need that full ride for that athlete to be able to go to university. And so, I think that there are some challenges there within. But, I mean, the youth sport's putting out a really, really good product right now. And more and more of our athletes wanting to stay home, I think, is good for our game. And when those young kids are able to go up to the local university and watch those players play, and then know that they're overseas, now playing as professionals, that can only help our game, right? That, when those athletes start to look at the youth sport as a destination as well, which is what's happened here. And so I like the direction of it. I'd love to see more scholarships in there, for the athletes, and that could maybe even help keep some more of our players home. But I definitely think it's moving in the right direction, and it's been benefiting a lot of our athletes. And probably the last thing I'd say is now that our competition structure has changed, right? And now that we're not just having one big tournament at the end of a summer, and we're playing now in the Americas, and we're having exhibition games during the season, we're now able to pull those players from those European teams to come in and play for their country during the year, right? November, February, when the NBA season's on. And what we're seeing more and more is that it's many of those youth sport players, right, that played in youth sport that are now playing professionally, that are now coming back and playing on the national team, having been properly developed within youth sport and doing very, very well, and bringing us right through the Americas, playing really, really good basketball. So youth sport's doing a great job. It's a great job. We're very supportive, and obviously we're hoping it continues to grow.
Yeah, if I'll just follow up on Rowan, that one of the things that he does well is like I said, we identify these athletes that are talented basketball players and work with them, and to provide counsel to them as to where is the best place for them to go, whether it's in high school or a prep school, or staying in Canada, going to the United States for prep school, or whether it's going to the university in United States, or going to staying in a place in Canada, or now there's going to be options for the G League and developmental league. So we work with the athlete and his family, and there's different options, and for different players, the answer is going to be different. What really bothers me is when someone goes to a bad situation in the U.S. to a school that really is not a good basketball program. They got a NCAA ride. And, not everyone's Duke or Indiana or Notre Dame, but, you really have to take an honest look. And if Rowan and his team can help provide advice to make sure that athlete has a good experience, not only for the basketball part, but also for the after basketball part of it. So I think, Rowan, again, does a good job in terms of the providing advice and counsel to these athletes so that they can get into the best situation for them and what's realistic for them.
Rowan, you seem to be doing everything well. You should be the CEO of Canada basketball.
Yeah, right.
He may be. I'm getting old. I see retirement on the horizon. So
Glen's doing the job. No, look, I'm working with the athletes, making sure that we're doing the right things, and at the end, you want to see it result, in wins, right? And that's kind of where we are now, right? Is I think that it took, I started in 2012, really more working with the, kind of GMing the younger teams, and it took us. I think we were sixth in the world at that point, and it took us a good, 6 years to get ourselves to a point where we rose up to number 2 in the world and won a World Cup, right? It takes time. Anybody here that understands businesses, understands how teams work, that it takes time, and I think that's where we are as well. And I think with our senior team, what you see is we broke in with some very, very young players, right? In 2015, those players coming in average age 22 years old in the starting lineup, right? No teams in the world win normally with a 22-year-old starting lineup, right? The experience normally is not there, regardless of how good they are. I think the USA tried that back in Athens many, many years ago, and I don't know if they ended up 5th or 6th with LeBron James, on that team, right? And so we've gotten the opportunity now to kind of build, and now we really believe that this is the time, right? We've taken the 5-6 years to kind of build our team and get the experience on with these players, and now's the time for us to come in now and perform. And so, you can really judge, I guess, what I'm doing here on the senior level with eventually the performance that we're able to put forward. So that's the area that I really want to do well in. So we'll see how that goes.
So one of Canada's shining stars moving forward is your son, RJ. So we can credit, you and the being around you as a reason why he's developed as such a star basketball player. But what advice did you give him growing up? What advice did you give him when he went off to Duke, and of course leading up to the NBA draft?
Well, I think one thing for him, it's always like keep the main thing, right? Like let's not get sidetracked, with anything. I think, and not to let anybody or anything stand in his way. But RJ's, unique kid. I think really right around 7th grade, going into 7th grade, he just told me, Dad, I don't want to play soccer anymore. I just want to play basketball. I said, well, why? Why do you want to, what's going on there, son? He said, well, I don't want to miss any more games. I just want to be there for my team. I said, okay, well, you're making a big decision. If you want to, slow down and stop these other sports, what are you trying to accomplish in basketball? We got to begin with the end in mind here. And that's when it all came out. I had no clue. It all comes out. He's like, Dad, I'm going to make the NBA, Dad. I'm going to be an all-star. I'm going to be a Hall of Famer. I'm going to win a championship. It all started pouring out. I said, wait, let's go to the store. We bought a whiteboard, right? And we put it all on this whiteboard, right? And we just started lining it out, right? 2019 was the year he was going to get drafted, right? For the goal he wanted. And we just started putting 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, all the way down to his current age. These are all the things you need to accomplish every single year for you to get there. And then really with that, I think the key thing was I just really didn't push him. I didn't push him at all, really. Initially, it was his mother, right? Like his mother, I put it on her. I put it on her. Like Rowan, it would be a crime if you don't train him. How could he be your son and you don't train him? It would be a crime. And finally, she said, look at him. He loves it. You're not pushing anything. He loves it. And so, I started paying closer attention. He did love it, and I started getting involved. And, and I think probably the main thing is I learned not to be coach at some point, right? Is, right around that grade 7 when he really started wanting to train, I was in the gym with him early morning and, he's looking a little listless, right? And, the competitor in me is, man, come on, chase that ball down. Let's go, And I realized at that moment, like, I really want to be dad, more than I want to be a basketball coach for my son. And so having really good coaches in there, supporting his growth all the way along, junior academy, our national team every summer, our programs, our provincial teams. He's been through every single facet of our system, making his way up. And then really just taking the position eventually of cheerleader, right? Of supporting, great job, son, stepping back and supporting him. And, he's got enough drive and and goals, and he's a type A type guy and all that. So he's got enough drive and all that. We just kind of need to support him and try to keep him focusing on the main thing being the main thing. And he has started with a really good year this year in the NBA. I think I saw some stats, maybe 7 other players at his age in the history of the league who performed at the level that he's performed at, and so. He's doing well. We want to see his efficiency grow over time, as you do all with most rookies. But I think he's doing well, and he looks like he's poised to do well. And probably for Glen, I think the most important thing is he wants to play for Canada. So I think that's always a good thing too. He's been playing all his life and loves the country and sees himself playing for us for many years.
So Glen, as a former GM, what do you see, or what would you have seen in RJ in that draft room? What are you looking for in a type of player, and did you see that in RJ?
Well, he was, an obvious top draft choice. So, he had the physical abilities, the tools, the skills, but I think when you interview the person too, and I think he comes across as such a very solid citizen, high character, all about team and winning. Those things are absolutely critical to building a franchise. And I think witnessed that he was in a very difficult situation with the Knicks in his first year, notwithstanding COVID. Even before that, they had a coaching change, controversy off the court with everything. And it's tough. And then it happens in New York where, there's more than enough people willing to criticize you for anything. So he's kept his focus. He stayed, focused on his goals. I know how hard he works. Rowan keeps telling me he goes back to the gym every night to work on his shooting. So, the love of the game, the willingness to work at your craft, all those things spell greatness for him going forward. And again, the character to work through difficult situations and to persevere. Not everyone has that, and that's a great sign for his future as his goal of getting into the Hall of Fame. So let's go.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
As someone that worked at MSG for many years, as the GM of the Knicks, what advice did you give him specifically when he got drafted there?
I didn't give him any advice. I think I talked to Rowan a little bit. I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to be in New York. They've struggled for a long time, so no reason why they shouldn't be successful. They have new leadership now, so hopefully they'll get that straightened out. But no, I think, just gave Rowan a little advice in terms of the people there and how to deal with things. But I don't think he needed much advice. I think, RJ comes from a solid family. He went to a great school at Duke where he was in the limelight, almost like it's the NBA, right? Or maybe even more so in some ways. So he's got that experience, and that pedigree is going to serve him well. So I don't think, if they were asking for advice, I would give it to him. I don't think they really need my advice. Like I said, I'm very hopeful that things are going to work out for RJ.
One thing I would say I would add to this with young players, and working with 300 to 400 players in my time here. One of the things that I see that I know is vitally, very important, they need support. Like, they're out there playing, right? They love the game, they're running and jumping and doing all that. But, the advent of the social media, my goodness, right? It's something that affects athletes, right? Sometimes they're in the locker room at halftime pulling up the phone to see what people are writing about them, right? Like, this is what's happening now in the game. And so, no matter how strong you think you are, right, you keep reading those messages and people keep killing you on the message boards and all that. That stuff can seep into your mind, right? It can seep into whether you take the next shot, when you go back out on the floor. And so, I think that's one thing generally I would say, for these young athletes or anybody that's coaching young athletes or advising parents, out there or that's involved in the game in any level is, support those athletes, just provide a circle around them of people that will tell them the truth, that love them, that are there to support them, to keep their minds, keep them focused on, the right things, the things that they can control, and keep them moving in that direction. Because, you'd be really surprised. There's, a lot of, rich kids, in the NBA, players, and some of them are struggling. Some of them are struggling with depression, right? You think, how could you be depressed, right? You're 26 years old. You got to sign a $200 million contract. But it very much is there, right? Because one of the things that happens to them is they're alone all the time, right? You start to become a prisoner of your fame. You end up having to sit in the room, all day. And so now you're in the room doing what? With your phone, right? Looking at all the messages with all the people talking bad about you. So, you really need to figure out how you support them, how you surround them. That's a really, really big part. More so now than I remember, back when I was playing, when I was with the Raptors or anybody else, it's way more prevalent now, the mental side of the mental performance and really surrounding these guys. And you have players that are much younger too, coming into the NBA as well. So that would be probably one tip I would give anybody that's out there working with athletes or in the game, involved in the game.
Well, we almost saw a similar situation when, if everyone watched The Last Dance, the incredible documentary that premiered during these quarantine times. With Michael Jordan, the interviews were in his room, in the hotel room, and all the cameras, the flash bulbs, everywhere he went throughout the world.
Yeah. And well, that's what social media does, right? It just, you don't even have to be Michael Jordan now, right? You don't have to be that level in order to have a lot of, followers. I think RJ went into the NBA last year with like almost 1.3 or 1.4 million people following him on social media at 19 years old. It's like, what do you do with that, right? And so that's what's happening to these athletes. And so that is a major part. I think Glenn referenced it a number of times in speaking, probably 4 or 5 times. He alluded somehow to the mental part of the game. 90% of the game is mental. Like when you get up to the NBA level, physically, generally, most of them they're mostly the same, right? You have some guys that are very odd, like a Kevin Durant, with lots of length and moving like he does. You have guys like Kevin Garnett. You have guys like Kawhi Leonard with those big long arms, those big huge hands. But generally speaking, most of them are they're average height, 6'7", run and jump. That's the average athlete. It's like, what is the separator? What is the separator? And I think it's a lot of the things that Glenn was talking about, right? How do you deal with adversity, right? Can you keep the main thing, keep focusing, keep moving forward? Can you persevere through? All of those things are the things that separate the greats, and also separate, the really, really good players, the ones with the long careers from some of those with the shorter ones. So that's a huge part of the game right now.
So for both your purposes, when you're trying to put together a team for small tournaments and especially the Olympics, which is everyone around the world is watching that tournament, how do you discern which players will be mentally tough and will be able to handle that adversity?
Well, I think one thing is their history is going to tell you a lot. If somebody is always usually focused on winning, there's a good chance that he's probably still going to be focused on winning. If somebody doesn't look at the barriers and somehow sees the glass as half full, all the time, the chances are in the deepest and most difficult of moments, they're going to continue to be who they are, right? And so that's one of the things for me is really tracing and tracking, who these players are, kind of all the way through, right? I think Glenn spoke to it about how they work, resiliency. These are some of the key things. I think the things like how they shoot, how they pass, how they, all those things are pretty simple to see, and you have all kinds of analytical programs that can give you information. But I also think you kind of need a lens that understands the game to see behind the analytical numbers, right? Like I can say a player might have difficulty shooting, or I could say a player is great shooting, he's a great shooter. But then I can also look at the team he played on, and the fact that the ball was getting delivered on time, and the fact that there was lots of space on the floor, and that each time he took the shot, he was wide open most of the time, right? He had 2 seconds to shoot the ball as opposed to 1 because there was less spacing, right? So all of those things factor in. So you do have to have clearly an experienced lens. But I do think at this stage, for me, a lot of it is what's going on upstairs. What's happening on the mental side with these players, I think for me is going to be a lot of the tell in terms of who's going to be able to perform for you in competition.
Yeah, no, that's good. And also sort of the right coach, right? So we're very fortunate to have Nick Nurse be our coach, who's a very flexible coach in terms of his approach to how to put his team in a position to win. And other coaches are a little more, system oriented, and you have to play a certain way. And so you got to know your coach and make sure that you're building a team that complements what he's going to do too. So, and that communication is really important. I think Rowan and Nick have developed a great rapport, and hopefully that'll, allow us to be successful when we get into the Olympics and the Olympic qualifying tournament.
So we've mentioned a lot of countries that you've either been to tournaments at or you've played in, but you both have a common interest that you've both visited Israel and you've played in Israel or coached in Israel. First, Glenn, can you tell us what you remember from the 2009 Maccabi games and that experience? Then Rowan, you spent part of your professional career in Israel. Tell us about basketball in the country and your memories.
Well, hey, I was an assistant coach on the men's team for Canada in the Maccabi games, and really a fabulous experience for me. First of all, I'd never been to Israel before. Rowan has obviously spent a lot more time there than I have, but just that experience. I'm not really a coach, but I was there with John Doerr from Concordia, and had just a great group of guys. We had a pretty competitive team. The U.S. had a very strong team, and Israel had a very strong team. But to do sort of the march of the parade was awesome, to see bits of the country, but just to be amongst all people, just enjoying sport, enjoying being together. It was to me a really wonderful experience. I'd not had the ability like Rowan to play as an athlete in these sorts of competitions, and I can only imagine how much fun that would be to actually be a player. So it's great that the Maccabi Canada sponsors and puts together these teams in all these different sports for kids to have this experience, and whether it's junior or the actual Maccabi games. So I commend everyone involved in that, and I know it's a lot of work, but I think it really does leave a great impression for everyone that participates. And I was very fortunate to be able to do it one time.
The basketball was great. It was up and down. It was a fast game. It was very fun. But what I remember was the living and the people. I mean, that by far was the best experience I had playing overseas. And I played in a lot of places. My wife and I did not want to leave that country. It was amazing. The people were so kind. Everybody was speaking English, and the focus on the family there was unlike I'd seen anywhere else. All the holidays that they had. I remember walking with my wife, feeding the ducks, with RJ as a young boy, and this was it was so amazing. Ramat HaSharon, Herzliya, that area there, just absolutely beautiful. Just outside of Tel Aviv. And then my wife and I, it was one of the few countries that we actually took the time and went all through the country, right? We went into Jerusalem, we went down to the Dead Sea, we were all over the place there. It was just such an amazing time. That's probably why I re-signed and went there the second year as well. The living for me was tremendous. Absolutely loved it.
David Goldstein, I don't know if you've read his book. He's used to be at U Sports. Now he's at the CFL. He wrote a book about American and North American players that went to play basketball professionally in Israel and wound up living there, staying over after playing days. I forgot the name of it, like something to Mecca or whatever it was. But anyways, look it up. It's a good book, and there's some great stories in there about the sort of the experience that Rowan had. Unfortunately, Rowan came back to Canada. So.
Great experience.
You're both cordially invited to join us in 2022 for the next Maccabi games.
All right.
There it is. He threw it out.
We have an interesting question from Facebook. We spoke about The Last Dance, and Glenn, your opinion is going to be interesting about this. A lot was made of Isaiah Thomas, and it's right here on the screen now, and the 1992 Dream Team. So what do you think of how they portrayed Isaiah and how he was not included on the 92 team?
Well, I'm a big fan of Isaiah's, right? And I played with him at Indiana. I worked with him both with the Toronto Raptors and the New York Knicks. And he is one of the most competitive, toughest guys I've ever met. And I think, that competitiveness, sometimes leads him to be disliked by his opponents. And but I have to tell you that I think he's really been treated unfairly, and I don't know why that is. There's no one that's done more for me personally than Isaiah Thomas of all the people that I've come across. And a lot of people have been good to me and helped me out a lot, but Isaiah sort of has been number one. And it bothers me the way he was portrayed in the lawsuits with at Madison Square Garden. It bothers me the way that he was left off the Dream Team. But, again, I wasn't really there. I don't know what his relationships were with those other players, but he certainly, as an athlete and as a competitor, he deserved to be on the Dream Team. And I wish it was different, but it isn't.
So only a couple more questions for you guys because we're running out of time. The 92 Dream Team goes down in history as probably the best basketball team that was ever assembled. If you have to put together a dream team for Canada, who is on that team?
Glenn?
Are we talking about the history, like over the 87-year history of Canada basketball, or are we talking about currently?
I'm talking about next summer at the Olympic Games.
Oh man, well, we've got some tough decisions to make, Rowan. But I think you got a sort of a 3-guard alignment there, probably. Jamal Murray, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and R.J. Barrett sort of off the front, and then you've got 2 bigs like maybe a Dwight Powell, a Kelly Olynyk, a Tristan Thompson. We got Dylan Brooks. Who am I forgetting? Like, it's such an. When I talked to Rowan about this, to see that team out there playing, oh man, I can't wait to see it. Hopefully happens because they're really, a highly skilled, multiple position players. Like Kelly Olynyk is really a better FIBA player than he is NBA player, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that's, just before I go there, the FIBA game is really good. Like, I don't know if people really appreciate how good you have to be to win at FIBA. Like, I was over at the World Cup last year, and the NBA with the US had a good NBA team. I mean, maybe not the superstars they're expecting, but they had a lot of really good all NBA players, some NBA All-Stars, and they finished 7th. So, we need our team, and if we get our team and they do what we can do, I know it's going to be really exciting to watch and see. So, who did I leave off, Rowan?
I think you're pretty good.
Yeah. All right.
You're pretty good. I think you hit it pretty well.
That's awesome. So before I let you guys go, first of all, thank you so much for your time. Incredible having you both on Frontline Access with Maccabi Canada. Any parting words? Any last advice for the young athletes watching tonight?
For me, for any young athletes, watching, it's, outside of just the normal skills, make sure that you build your skills, right? You build your understanding, and you dedicate yourself. But I think maybe the biggest thing that you can do is to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. It's a long road to getting to play at the highest level or to execute at the highest level of business. It's all the same. You have to believe in your ability. There will be moments where maybe people don't believe in you. And so, you got to keep working and keep pushing and make them believe. If they don't want to believe, you make them believe, right? By what you do and your consistency driving it. And that's probably, one of the big things. It's not always the most talented that make it the furthest, right? It's usually the work ethic and it's the other things that go along with it. And I would just say, Canada basketball is a great bet, right? It's a great bet. This is the time. We need your support. And, we're going to try to go ahead and win and get on that podium and win medals for our country.
Yeah, I'll just to say that, you get to only play for so long. Rowan was a great player, but he doesn't play anymore. His back's bugging him, he tells me. So, I used to play up till my sort of mid-30s until my knees went. So, but enjoy it while you can and make the most of it, and take good care of yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. That's perseverance is, I think, is one thing you learn playing sports. You're not going to win every game. You're not going to have a great effort every time out. But, I think just keep sticking with it and enjoy it, and be a good teammate, and be respectful of the referees. I think that's something that's often missed, that, we need referees to keep our game going, and we mistreat them, and we expect them to keep coming back. So, but really, do yourself and your parents proud, and act appropriately, and always give it your best effort, and just enjoy it while you can, because it's all too short.
Well said. And Glenn, not to date you, but I believe next year's the 40th anniversary of your national championship in Indiana.
Yeah. Okay, move along.
Rowan, Glenn, thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic. I look forward to seeing you in 2022 in Israel.
Okay, thanks for having us.
Okay, thanks for having us.
Have a good night.
Goodbye.